YouTubing. Up, listeners, Dirty Snow Podcast, Season 5, Episode 3. We're here in the studio. We got an action-packed episode. This is going to be a strong hour no matter what. Are you ready for this, Norm?
Yeah, I'm just, I don't think 1 hour is enough time to talk to not our 1, 2, but 3 special guests today. But first, we'll do a little bit of book work here, talking about the upcoming race weekend up in Beausejour, the CPTC. Kicks off the 2024-2025 snowmobile ice oval season. Entries look good right now.
We're coming in at 114 currently registered. I believe that number is going to jump. I bet you there'll be probably 120, 125, maybe 130.
Yeah, and I heard floating around 25 champ sleds right now. I think they're expecting a few more last minute entries.
Currently, we have confirmed 22 riders on the roster for the champ sleds. 17 plus participants in the F500 class. You know, that's going to be a big topic later today. 17 to launch the first weekend of the year is pretty good. I'd have to go with F3s. It's looking like 13. That number is up from last year. That just tells us we're probably looking at 25 to 30 of them for Eagle River. It's going to be a big deal. F3 is a huge class for this year, at least at Eagle River.
Yeah, good healthy numbers to start the year with, and I think a lot of that comes down to there not being a lot of ice available to get test time early in the season. That's hard, so you want to make those early season races to get your stuff dialed in for some of the bigger stuff coming up.
Everything's about testing, getting prepped for that big weekend, but you know, this is the first points already for Pro Star. A lot of these guys first time on the ice this year. A few guys snuck out, have been testing. We've seen some clips released from Strathcona a few guys out there running stuff around. So not many guys have opportunities on the ice, but the guys that did are taking advantage of it. Highlights for CPT, it's going to be live streamed on the YouTube channel. You know, multiple camera angles, corners, live interviews in the pits with Mr. Brett Richter. And I believe he's going to be running around with a camera it's going to be awesome. They're going to have some more things in detail. This team up there really wants to see this grow, and I think they took some notes from us at Wausau.
Yeah, that's good. It's all about how you can present it to your fans. Multiple camera angles, I think, are huge, and more importantly, it's free. It's free on YouTube, so that's good. They can reach pretty much any audience. Then I know I'll be tuning in over the weekend, back and forth a little bit. What else you got from up there? I know you had a phone call with one of the Baker family members up there.
Yeah, we have Saturday night live under the lights again. That's making a big comeback. And to addition, we got some chats coming in. I really ran through my conversation, bullet points. They just different ways to consume racing is one of the things I really hope they target and break down. I'd like to see, I know we're going to be on a time slot schedule, which is awesome. That was a huge improvement years past. But how can we make this easier to consume ice oval racing? And one thing that came to mind was cutting these videos up on a Saturday night and just having the heats and the finals all cut into one reel, 30, 40-minute consumption, I think would be wonderful to have. We're doing these live streaming, but how can we make this consumable at a faster and more easier way instead of me having it on all day in the background?
Yeah, you're saying like instead of watching it live, you get to select a class. This is all the heats from that class. This is the final. I
guess I'm not saying each class would be. I think just let's hit the premier classes. Let's make it easy to consume. Throw in some interview stuff, and maybe even do a voiceover instead of the announcer. Oh, so whatever's on camera, a voiceover is made to target it more. Or
something someone could chop up at the end of the weekend for like a midweek recap that could get posted.
Yeah, something more to make this easy to consume again.
Yeah,
we need to keep this fan growth growing. Some other things that are on the radar recently that we've seen is the 106 track. With this new stud thing. So me and Norm were sitting here in the studio throwing ideas around of how would we attack this. So currently this new 106 track is slightly different in the belting. So it threw off the studs. So all studs, if you ran an 820 slim, say Woody's product, it is clicking when you run it through the gauge.
The spec gauge.
We figured it's about 30,000. So let's say 3 pieces of paper. If you were to take 3 average show printer papers, it's about
three of those.
3 of those is about 30,000 is what you're going over on this. How serious, if you're the tech guy and this, all these people that bought these new tracks are facing this, is that 30,000 you think going to be beneficial?
Oh man. See,
I don't think so.
I don't think in this application, no, I don't think, and that's 30,000ths of stud penetration into the ice difference. In that case, I don't think that is that big of a deal. 30,000ths in say boring over a motor. Yes, that's a bigger, application deal. So,
Steve, am I wrong on my measurements here?
We were told it was 3 sheets of paper was the difference.
That's what I figured. Maybe I'm wrong,
but I don't think it's worth scrutinizing over. You're not going to change the studs. I mean, you're going to really force everyone that's running a 106 to grind their studs down, bend them over. That might be the thing. I think it's up to the tech people. I think there needs to be consistency.
Let's just talk about what we do with our fix. I don't think we're going to throw anything of.
I like
10
the idea.
Sheets of paper. Let me get some paper here. I don't think it's an advantage. I'm looking at paper here, doing my in-house measuring by the tech gauge over here. These paper.
Yeah,
but I'm going to say you gain 2 pounds in weight. I throw out the difference in the length,
and it's no difference. If you have a worn out 106 track where the wipers are worn down a little bit, a standard 820 stud is not going to pass on a worn out track. So
here's how I'd go about the fix. I'd throw out, even thinking about grinding them down, I would run the 820 studs. If everybody's in the same boat with these tracks, Woody's is not going to go out, or Snow Studs, or anybody's going to go out and reproduce a stud
this year
with hardening or anything. I don't think in the future even, there's no point. Everybody's going to have the new 106 track. As long as they're running an 820 stud and the backer plate comes out the same as if they were running on the other track, let it fly. There's no point of this anymore. Everybody's going to be faced. We're not going to go waste the time creating a new product.
What you're saying is if, say a few of your studs click on the gauge or whatever, how it overhangs,
develop a new gauge for it and let it fly.
Either develop a new gauge or say even remove the stud and measure it. Make sure it's 820.
Remove the stud, measure with the calipers, call it good. 820 is the way I'd let it fly. There's no point in going through this process of slave laboring in the shop for hours upon hours when it sucks already to do a track.
Yeah, I understand rules are rule, and I think the gauge does have some tolerance built in. These are hypotheticals that we've heard of where some people are going to have a few issues with some of the 106.
It's a hot subject. Everybody's going to be on the new one eventually.
It depends on how thick your backer plates are, how tight you torque your studs down, how far they suck in. a lot of variables.
I would pull the studs and just say, hey, the rule's 820 and this is the thickness of backer.
Yeah. And then does it pass? Is it, they get,
because
I'm sure the associations
if you
can get-
slim your backer plate up, then you have to shorten the tube because you have too much stick out on the backside, or you solve one problem and it destroys 3 other things. There's too many other things going on. And the difference is I throw studs out like they're candy. I'm not going to fuck around. At the end of the day, I'm not screwing around. If I see a stud with a tip already done, I throw that shit out. I don't waste my time. I don't even think about touching a grinder or even resharpening studs. They're junk in my opinion. You get new ones. They're dime a dozen at the end of the day.
And most of the 106 people that are on 106 tracks are usually on a stud program. So yeah, that's just a point of information for the people that are going up to Beaujeu. A few issues that was brought to our attention. I think Tech will come to a solution that'll appease all parties.
But grinding's just out of the question.
It's not a lot of work, but it's tedious.
It's out of the question. If you're in the race shop, if you're in their trailer, you got to grind an extra 150 studs possibly. You go through dirt, I'd say Eagle River like 2 years ago, and you destroy half a track. You don't have that much time on your hands.
We ground studs one. We had
to ground them like ended up with one guy in the emergency
Mark
room.
had to go to the hospital. He had a metal shaving in his eye at 3 in the morning.
We're just saying if it's not something that's produced and you got to go through all this extra labor, it's not worth it, in my opinion.
Yeah. Like John said, grinding's not consistent on every stud. Yeah.
And as you add in different, if you grind
variables,
it, the angle changes and your slippage on the ice changes because now you have a blank pattern versus being. There's too many things that could goof it up. In my opinion, make it easy. Change the gauge. Everybody will be on the new track within this year. Let her fly. Yeah. We got to make this stuff easy and stamp out. This is not a custom business at the end of the day.
Absolutely. So that was just a topic for us to discuss because few people asked us about it. But yeah. So that's Canada. It's happening Canada, this weekend.
Big race weekend.
Up at Beaujeu. They start Friday. I believe they have a test and tune. They have, I think, around 12 inches ice right now, or that's the target goal for the race weekend. Little bit of snow that they've had to plow off, but temps are looking good up there, and they start Friday, the 13th here, and then Pro Star Cup race for the champ guys will be Saturday, and then they got a whole nother day of their program on Sunday. So that is the first.
And then they have Monday open practice.
Oh, for anyone.
So anybody sticking around Monday, you can turn as many laps as you want, destroy the ice. That's their goal. They're going to rebuild it anyways. They're planning on having currently 10 inches by race weekend. 12 is the outcome number they're targeting.
Perfect. That's a solid base.
Practice 1 to 4. Brett Richter tuning in today. Thanks, Brett. You can check him out at Chasing the Checkers. Also, he will be your trackside live with Brett.
Perfect. All right. Well, another big topic. We covered it last week. It is the Dick and Audrey Decker Triple Crown for the F500 class this year, consisting of 5 races between PVR and USSA.
3 tracks.
3 different tracks. So we have 3 special guests here to talk about it with us. So let's welcome to the show Alan Decker, Chuck Decker.
How's it going, guys?
Good. And then Manawa Snodio promoter Dave Sarna.
How we doing?
Good. Thank you, gentlemen, for being here. So without further ado, I guess we know Chuck and Alan, you guys have been around snowmobile racing, the Decker name, involved in ice oval racing for a very long time, as well as other forms of motorsports. So thank you guys for being here, taking time out of your day to talk about this. But how did the Triple Crown come about?
I think that's for Dave.
I'm gonna let Dave answer that one because the first I heard about it was at my father's funeral. Dave came up to me very quietly. He said, "I don't want to spend a lot of time, Alan," but he said, "We're putting a Triple Crown race together in memory of your mother and father, and I'll get back to you." And then he came up and had lunch with me with Peter Griffin. And he just told me all of his ideas and everything that he had laid out for the Triple Crown.
Okay.
And of course, I got excited and I said, Dave, if there's anything we can do to help you out to get this thing kickstarted and get it off the road and going, we're here to help you.
Perfect. So, Dave, do you want to touch on it a little bit? I know our conversations over the last couple of years, we've talked about a Triple Crown or a Super Series race where we'd like to see drivers, run an oval race, run a Le Mans, and then, another variation of racing in there to make it, 3 different types of snowmobile racing ventures.
Well, I got to be honest with you. I'm not so sure how quick I want to jump in on this because we went just from controversial stud length to stud gauge into the Triple Crown. So now let me assure everybody tuning in, the Triple Crown is totally above board. And if your studs are illegal, we're sorry. We're not going to let you run. Okay.
Yeah. That's F500. Totally different track.
The 122
121
or 121 track is
Good.
nothing has changed. You're good. There's no reproductions. There's no worries on your market there.
Cool.
This is a niche. One thing was 106.
So I will. Yeah. Thanks, Alan, for a little bit of that background. When Dick was alive, and I really got to know Dick well toward the end of his life, and I sincerely enjoyed the man. And he was my dad had passed away a few years before Dick came into my life in a big way, and he's just one of those kind of guys that you could go to and you could joke around with him, but yet when it was serious business, he was just really a good confidant, a good friend, and he had this vision of putting together, thanks, Brand, on that a 4-race series. He loved Manawa. He was working with the promoters up at Crandon, Eagle River. We were looking at a 4-location series. And I mean, this man's calling me. He's 90 years old. Okay. So you guys that are out there and you're kind of wishy-washy about snowmobile racing, this is a guy that spent his entire life in it, brought in his entire family. And at 90, he's still be excited about putting together another race series. And he would call me and ask if I had any other ideas, any other leads. And I love Dick, and I really and I felt very strongly about this, and I've shared it, with different commentators. But I think that right now is a time that we have 2 major, at least in our area, ice oval racing associations between USSA and PVR. And part of my personal goal is to bring them together, get them on the same page, get them racing on track side by side, and help to restore racing in that regard. So I wasn't real fond of another offshoots series, but I love Dick, and I was always willing to hear him out. So I knew he was not well last year at Eagle River. He was failing. I think Alan did take him to the race in Wausau, and he just was barely, he was a celebrity there, and he just barely was able to make the interview there. And so, I guess we were all holding our breath that he'd carry on for a few more years, but unfortunately it didn't happen. And so actually Bob Richardson, who's the race director from USSA, called me the day that Dick passed on, and he said, "Hey, Dave, I hate to be the bearer of bad news, but I bet this one won't surprise you that Dick passed on this morning." And I remember saying to Bob, Bob, we got to do something this year for Dick. And my original concept was something in remembrance for Dick. And so that kind of was on my mind. I went to dinner with the Bennetts, Matt and Dean Bennett. And I know a lot of your listeners know that family. And I don't know where they were testing, but I just was notified by Steve Perrick from PVR that Dean took a fall on the ice, cracked the back of his head open. He's in the hospital. He's got a brain hemorrhage, and he is deaf. And so, our prayers and thoughts got to go out to one of our guys who's trying to get ready for going to Canada and ends up in the hospital. But I met with him and Greg from Ironwood, and I said, "What do you guys think about doing this Triple Crown thing?" And you know, the original thought was about the way it somewhat ended, starting at Ironwood, but having a points race on both weekends for PVR, for USSA. I know the way Dick felt about the amateur ranks and moving them up into the pro categories. And I said, you know, why don't we'll take F500. It's one of the biggest classes. It's really a stepping stone into champs and development. And I said, why don't we embrace that class? And we'll do points both between PVR and USSA. They both offer that class. They both tech their machines exactly the same way. We'll come up with a way to award points, and we'll run 2 races at start out at Ironwood, 2 races at Wausau, USSA and PVR weekend, and we will end up at Manawa at the Snowdio on February 15th and 16th, and we will have the final there at Manawa on the 16th. So I kind of filled Alan in with it. And, you know, when you're talking to somebody and they keep going like this with their head, that means they like what you're saying. And within a matter of days, he had Chuck involved, and Chuck as well brought a very huge promoter background to this thing, and came up with a lot of additional ideas to make this attractive. And, you know, I think the big thing that all your listeners are talking about is we agreed that we're going to offer $10,000, not just total prize money, to win. And that money is pretty much in the bank right now. And so that will be offered for the winner of this Triple Crown. And so just that dollar figure is going to attract a lot of people that may not even have thought about racing an F500 or bringing an F500 back out of storage. And we knew and we understood we're going to get some ringer drivers. They're going to be out there, guys that are very competent, very qualified pros to try to cash in on some of this prize money. And we understand that, we accept it, and we're going to let the chips fall as they may. What Chuck really brought to it, and I'm going to turn it over to him in a second here, but excuse me, Chuck said, let's do this, Dave. Let's have all of the preliminary races, points races, to qualify for a front row start at Manawa. The original thought was whoever accumulated the most points in all these point races would be the champion. So now we're going to have all these 10 guys with the most points. They're going to be side by side, handlebar to handlebar, 3 o'clock on February 16th at Manawa. And out of those 10 guys and 2 in an LCQ race, one of those 10 or 12 is going to take away this $10,000 check.
Yeah, well, I'm going to start off. Let's just say, hey, get well soon to the Bennett family and Dean for the fall. He's a good guy and a huge supporter of everything over at Manawa and a lot of the racing programs. Just have to get that right out there, right up front. And I see Matt's watching. That's real important, and good to see those
tune
guys.
into the Bennett Racing Facebook page for any updates. So Matt and Dean and the Bennett family, you guys are in our thoughts and prayers. Get well soon. So, but yes, like you said, preliminary races, you want to be in the top 10 for the final in Manawa. And Chuck, it sounds like you kind of were the brains behind that operation. What was kind of the thoughts behind that?
Well, basically, Norm, because it's such a big purse, it's such a, there's going to be so much media attention and so much attention brought to these drivers, this class and this series, is that, they'll run the 2 races in Ironwood, the 2 races in Wausau, and then the idea was they're going to run 2 races in Manawa, and then they were going to have a winner. Okay, but you got all these people there, and what, he just going to announce a winner? So it's like, no, we got to treat this like a big race that we do in Eagle River, the World Championship, top 10, 3 o'clock start. The crowd has to see the winner. They have to see the person win the race. That was my idea of thinking that way. And then the build on that, have and just to have this big championship race all accumulate on Sunday in Manawa at the Snowdeal.
Yeah, absolutely. And from a race fan's perspective, I like it a lot better in that format, because you could have someone dominate the first 3 or 4 events and have enough cumulative points over the second place guy where all he might have to do is just start the race in Manawa and he automatically gets a paycheck, where now you're forcing guys to race a little harder.
Oh, this makes you hungry at the end. This isn't just, run the series, get a championship, and collect it at a banquet. This brings a whole nother level, like you said, bringing it in front of the fans. Your blood, sweat, and tears are going to go into that last, 10
15 lap
final. And it's going to be all out on the line. It's going to be the first corner is going to be the energy. The heart rates are going to be through the roof. And these drivers are not racing for a small chunk of change. And this is 10K and Henry gun engraved. Like most of those guys, the gun would have did it. And the 10's just a bonus.
Yeah, so there's been a lot of chatter, a lot of excitement on it. The way we're going to kind of, we had talked about running another qualifier at Manawa, and then now you're racing around to trailers, letting guys, oh, hey, you're in. Don't forget, you got to race again tomorrow. And we've had various Zoom meetings on this and discussed a lot of the way that this thing would run. And we've had a lot of input from both USSA and PVR collectively on it. I will say this much. I mean, this really wasn't even my idea. Really, it was Dick Decker's that inspired me to put something together. And what better family or a husband and wife team, to recognize is anybody but the Deckers. I mean, they've given their lives to this, and why not make a big spectacle out of it? But we talked about various ways it could be run, and we just thought let's simplify it. So after that Wausau race, we will know who is going to be on that front row, and so we're actually going to send out. And so you guys are listening. We're going to have all your contact information as you fill out your F500. So if you go to Decker Triple Crown, you go to the Manawa Snowdeal, there's links to that page to enter, and we're going to have all that information. So we will be mailing to you a formal invitation, almost like a wedding invitation. Congratulations, you will be racing at Manawa at 3:00 for the Decker Triple Crown. We've had a lot of sponsors that have stepped up already, that if they're not offering a part of the prize money, they're offering merchandise. So it's not only just going to be the cash value, there's going to be extra bennies that'll go along with that. And Chuck, he really stuck his heels on this stuff, and I appreciate the guy. He said, you know what, Dave, 1:00, we're going to run this LCQ. And so the 11th through 20th guys, they will know there's LCQ at 1, and whoever those top 2 guys are, they will transfer to a back row start for the final at 3:00. And as we've seen before, even if you're in that back row, you get a good hole shot, and people get bottled up in turn number 1, all of a sudden you go from 12th to 5th in a big hurry.
Yeah, that's a super racy track once you're on that lake ice, and the opportunity is there. The bottom could push out, and there could be a mix-up. There could be a restart for all you know, or mid-race break, let's call it, a yellow comes out, and it resets the field, and you get a good little breather, and you get that big burst of energy. You can do a super speeder on the outside and make something stick. There's lots of opportunity here. This race could pan out anyway, and yeah, the back row guy, don't ever count him out. We've seen it happen. We've seen a WC come off the back row and win. Anything is possible at these events.
Yeah. I especially like that Manawa is the championship facility. It's lake ice. That is something some of these drivers don't race on a whole lot. There's not too many lake races. Yes, they test on the pond, but when there's a couple hundred sleds sharing the same track, people aren't used to how the ice deteriorates and how the groove changes. I mean, when we were at Manawa a few years ago, there was 8 inches of difference between the outside edge to the innermost groove of the
Yeah.
corner?
You get a lot of characters that change, and you get that on the man-made tracks. You get it on the ice, but yeah, it does dig out differently. It's sometimes harder, it's sometimes hot. It all depends on temperature, the day it was formed. You don't know. Lake ice builds from the bottom up instead of top, or
Bottom up.
bottom up, but
Right.
it's different. It's at a different temperature. It's got a shielding on it. It's
A little bit of
it's
crust
doing its
built
own
in.
creativity. You may have a weak spot in there. You may have a great, it's the greatest part about it is it's an evolution
different.
track, and it's always going to be changing.
I'm sort of really dating myself, and if you don't mind me throwing this comment in, but I'm up there in age, and a lot of my old racing crony buddies from the New London area, they remind me of these races years back. I mean, the very first years of USSA, and one of my best pals I always give ribbon to is Al Stern, and he said, Dave, let me tell you something. Years back, we would go to Race on Lakes, USSA event. We would literally start out that early that morning plowing the track, plowing ice. To make it happen, we put our markers out, we put our hay bales out, and whatever the surface was, we raced on it, And I kind of got to agree with them, because our guys, I know it's safety. I realize that, and we want to make a smoother track surface as we can. But, they're not prima donnas. And there's a lot more speed than they had back then. But, those guys, just whatever the surface was, it was the same for everybody. And they just got out there and they tied it up, and they got out there and did it. And at the end of the day, they got their check and a couple beers, and they headed back home.
Yeah, that is true. That's, I mean, I've seen photos before my time. They were racing WCs on wood chips and sawdust and whatever they could to put a race on.
Alan and Chuck, I bet you guys can throw some stuff in here. You've seen hundreds of tracks in your life, different conditions, from late nights testing, probably when you shouldn't have been out there with headlights, to testing crazy, inventive, futuristic sled products and parts to try to make something happen and work in a unique way. Where do you guys see this all going, and what's your input on it?
Well, this is Alan. It's been a few years since Chuck and I drove competitively, but could tell a lot of stories about, I actually started racing in 1967 on a Skidoo Olympic. And I built a small building, and I tried to have my first snowmobile that I raced and my last snowmobile that I raced. So my first one was a 1967 Olympic, and my last one was the last twin track. And if you consider going from leaf springs to bogey wheels to a twin track, the evolution and the technology that I got to witness through my career was really something. I mean, that opportunity and that experience was just I was very fortunate to have that opportunity. And by the way, the drivers that we got to race against, I mean, when I was a junior, when I just started in the early 70s, I would look up to Gilles Villeneuve and Coltham and Thompson and Duhamel and Mike Trapp and Sammy Sessions and Hayes and Eastman. And then by 1978, we got our first IFS. And that was a deal maker for we were still independent, of course. But then we were able to compete with the big boys, and we were able to compete with factories. And that was a really big year for the IFSs. And of course, after that, I went to the factory, and I rode with the Skidoo factory in 1979 and 1980 with Jacques Villeneuve. Then we developed the twin track. And the twin track thing, you guys, was really an experience. I mean, the twin tracks were just wonderful sleds to race. I can remember racing with the brother teams like the Goodwins and the Remenschneiders and the Vasseurs and the Van Dolders. And it was great. There was big payouts. It was very competitive. There was a lot of snowmobiles. There was a lot of hikers, there was a lot of racers. As Chuck had mentioned, ESPN was filming the races. It was a good era to be in. But what I wanted to mention, I think a lot of people know this that are probably listening, but probably some that don't, is that at least we're very involved in snowmobile racing yet. I had 2 daughters, and my oldest daughter, Paige, because those girls, by the way, started racing snowmobiles when they were really young. So they were always around the racetracks, right? So guess what? They meet snowmobile racers. And our oldest daughter, Paige, she married Jay Middlestead, who, by the way, won the World Championship in 2022.
Yes.
Something that I never got accomplished. And my younger daughter, Claire, married Zach Herfindahl, who in his own right is a pretty good cross-country racer, won the I-500 multiple times, won the Sioux 500. So it's just, it's still part of us, and it's still a big part of our lives. So the Triple Crown, like when Dave came to me, and by the way, he had this more figured out than when he's telling you, because he knew the class, he knew where they were racing and everything. And so they really, we just had to jump in and help Dave out and get it going. But I'm looking forward to this because, these F500 drivers, they're in their own right, they're great drivers, and they're the future of our snowmobile. And it gives me an honor to go and work with them and have them participate in this series and have them grow out of it. Because I look back at my opportunity and all the experience and all the different snowmobiles that I got to race. And I think some of these people are going to have that same opportunity.
Yeah, absolutely. F500 is a stepping stone class to the future champion F3 drivers. In my opinion, it's a spec class where everyone's, for the most part, on the same equipment. So it really comes down to the tuner and the driver on who's going to put their sled where, who's going to drive it in deeper than the next guy. So I think they deserve just as much recognition as the champ guys. They carry a ton of entries as well. And don't ever look down on your support divisions.
Well, I always look at F500 and I go, what's going to win the race? This right here. Because a lot of the guys won't hold it as long as the next. And then the guy that holds it the longest is going to win. Most likely win a wrecker. One of the two. You're going to win or you're going to have an issue. And you're going to go through brakes. And if you're not going through brakes on an F500, you're not driving it hard enough.
Well, and as you know, Brandon, you got to step up, right? If you just race with the same group all the time, you just stay with that group. You go to the next group, you get, you step it up and you go and you get better and you learn more and you work harder and you keep hunting, right? And you keep going. So now I think that this Triple Crown will help bring a lot of the F500 drivers together and get more competitive and work harder and learn more and up the game.
100%. These guys they've been there the whole time, and it's just, support. But now we're giving them the opportunity. We've seen this happen in Alexandria, and it was amazing. Now you guys bring it back to give them this opportunity to be a title fighter. This is a pro class. It's pro F500 at the end of the day. We can never take that name away from them. It is top level guys with creativity as well. These sleds are not just your simple thing. They've evolved over the years, and to where they are today is they're an IFS sled that performs very well. They get around the corner very well, and they have enough power to make stuff happen. But being that even 500 motor, it really helps even that field out, and having the non-adjustable front shocks and making this where it has to be kind of in a box, but it's still a very open class with creativity, which a lot of those guys bring out too.
One thing, if I could jump in for a second, and I got to get Chuck's comments because he is super valuable to the whole process. People have said, well, it seems like you got this thing all kind of laid out. I tell you, and I have to recognize 2 other brothers here between Steve and Mike that are also from the Decker Brothers Racing that are also very instrumental with this whole process. And these guys, they kind of shared with me, like Dave now Now you understand, I mean, we're going to do this for years to come. And I mean, I'm not getting that any younger. I mean, I'm sometimes I'm looking at days, you know, hangover times, you know, I don't know if I can take many more of this. And you know, they said, Dave, we're looking at like 10 years down the road or longer. And I really love that concept because I think, you know, we are looking too much in the snowmobile racing world of today, this season. And I think to keep people energized and excited, we need to talk about long-term because, you know, those of us that are out here yet, we got our heels stuck into this. That's all we know. And we're going to chase this thing right to the bitter end and let it live for another 50 years. But, you know, Decker said, Dave, you know, we're talking with people that want to support this for 5, 8, 10 more years. And with that said, there's nothing saying that this has to stay as an F500 class in the future. It could be other classes. It could be other locations. And so we can kind of share the wealth and we can, you know, make it more attractive to other promoters who also, you know, I've had calls from other folks that like, wow, Dave, are you mad at me because you're not coming to my track? Well, no, I'm not at all. This is just the way the original plan is going to work out. But next year, it could be 3 totally different locations, a totally different class, and away we go again. You know, so I think that'll keep it interesting and fun. It will never lose its name. It's going to be called the Dick and Audrey Decker Triple Crown till the very end. But there's going to be a new twist to it every year and more attraction.
Yeah, absolutely. And that puts, you know, that adds sleds to different classes. I think we've seen that in the Supermod 440 class with that being a premier class, more, you know, builders coming out of the woodwork. And I know I've seen across Facebook, a couple different F500 people looking for more sleds, a couple different drivers looking to jump classes specifically for this series. So as it rotates, or if it does rotate, I think that'll boost numbers overall for snowmobile racing.
Yeah, you just have to keep the main principles and kind of what gives it that Triple Crown feeling. I think keeping the point series like it is to a ticket to the big show is kind of a big thing. Maybe make that a prize thing instead of doing like you see rings or you see different things. I think bringing something in to make it a tradition would be awesome. And then you can start to change the classes and jump around and stuff, but keep your main points and your principles. And I think it's a great thing.
Yeah, let's get Chuck to jump in because we had this conversation just the other day, and you know, he really loved the idea of the innovator, the guy that, you know, is going to be building the sled and modifying it and tuning it and improving it. And Chuck, go ahead. Yeah, share what we had talked about the other day, please.
Well, you know, we were talking about the F500 versus other classes, and I said the F500 class is a kind of a builder's class. I mean, I know that the motors are stock, but it allows these drivers to start learning, like Alan referred to earlier. You know, you always start somewhere, but where you end up is totally up to the individual. But the F500 class is like a builder's class. The Supermod 440 Vintage is a builder's class. Champ class obviously is a builder's class, and I like those types of classes because that's what, at least for myself, and I think Alan, I think most race drivers, that's where we got our passion, is to be in the shop and try to figure out something, you know, whether it was the carbide was a ½ inch farther forward, or, you know, we trailed the left's trailing arm a little bit versus the right, you know, stud pattern a little bit different. I mean, little minute things that translated into speed on the track. And F500 class gives that opportunity. So I think it's a great class you picked to start this out with. And I agree. It could be, you know, Supermod 440, it could be a Champ, it could be an F3, it could be any division of racing. And I like what Brandon talked to about traditions, and I believe in traditions, and I think, you know, traditions will come, and this first year is going to be important. We're going to do our best to do it right, and I think we'll set some traditions right off the bat, whether it's the qualifying process, whether it's the laps we run, cowboy hats for the top 10. All those little things are traditions. And you gotta, that's what's going to make it special.
And maybe while we're on the cowboy hat concept here, you guys did a great job of pulling up some old Decker race photos, and I think the audience would love seeing these and hearing from the guys that were there that made it all happen, and some comments for reflecting back.
Yeah, give me 1 second just to pull that up here. There's our little logo that we made. But yeah, the cowboy hats. We were joking around with these guys before the show. Kind of something that they got back in the day. If they want to allude on how the cowboy hats came up.
Yeah. Geez, Chuck, you look pretty young there. Go ahead.
Yeah, I still look better back then too, didn't I?
I got that Quebec mustache going on there. Jeepers cripes.
I'm not sure. We always had some crazy hats in our race team, and I don't know. We just had those cowboy hats, and I know you talked about the Kawasaki Tournament of Champions. They gave us cowboy hats too, so maybe it was something we took from that. But I remember.
Well, we might have the. Yeah, we always had tried to set the trend with a hat, but I do remember when we ran the Kawasaki Tournament of Champions and we ran the series over here in the U.S., 5 or 6 different racetracks we ran at. Alexandra was one, Ironwood. But the last year, they packed up all those Kawasaki's and flew them over to Sweden, and we ended up over there. They took the 10 top U.S. drivers against the 10 top Swedish and Finnish drivers, and we ran over there. And I'll never forget getting to the airport at New York. And Kawasaki said, "Oh, you guys are the U.S. team. You're going to be the Kawasaki Cowboys." They gave us cowboy hats, and we were wearing them all over there in Finland and Sweden. So everybody knew us as one of the Kawasaki Cowboys. But it was really fun to race over there on those racetracks over in Europe. And by the way, those racetracks over there were kind of like our racetracks. So we raced at. They had horse racing tracks over there. And of course, up in the north of Sweden and Finland, they would freeze them, and we had half-mile ice ovals that we would race on, just like we did over here. Well, I just remember those hats specifically with the Kawasaki Tournament of Champions.
Yeah, you could get creative with that, that do maybe not a felt hat, but something, and then use the 3 Decker colors.
Crowns, yeah.
The orange, the yellow, and a black, and then have it kind of as a stringer on it.
I like the logo, Brandon. I didn't see it, but now I saw it flash up there.
We'll put it back. We'll get back to that here, and so that was just some ideas, kind of stuff we're tossing around. But you guys raced in what a lot of people consider the golden era of racing. You're a whole racing family. Maybe elaborate on kind of how that started. And I mean, you guys have been around, like you said, since the late 60s, as far as snowmobile racing. How did that come about, I guess, for those that don't know?
Well, I guess this is Chuck. We were living in Minneapolis at the time on Lake Minnetonka, and snowmobiling was just kind of really getting strong, and we started snowmobiling a bit before that in the early 60s, but we were living in Minneapolis, and I think it was Steve or Alan, one of the two, came home and said they heard about a snowmobile race somewhere and they wanted to go do it, and we went and raced. I wasn't old enough. Steve raced, Alan raced, Mike was into ice hockey, he didn't want to go. And that's where it began, was up in Minneapolis. And I don't know, we just got hooked on it right away. We loved the snowmobile. We would ride every single day. We'd come home from school and we'd get on our sleds, and we were right on the lake, and we would just go out and ride, and all the neighbors, everybody had snowmobiles. So we were riding 7 days a week. I mean, our race sleds, when we finally did get race sleds back then, in like 69, the 69 bubble nose round dot TNTs. We had a 399, two 340s, and a 292. and I had a 292, and Mike and Alan had the 340, and Steve had the 399 because of age difference, what class we could race. But we'd trail ride our race sleds all day long. We'd go and we'd win races. And we look back at it now and we think, why were our sleds faster? We're always accused of cheating. But we learned something way back when we began, that our snowmobiles would have 3,000 miles on them, and the track was like a rig.
I was worn
If
in.
you take a new rubber track back, then they were rock hard. It took more power to turn it. But we trail roll our sleds, and we think by just putting all these miles on that everything was loosened up and it went faster. So years later, when we had our race shop and we were racing stock sleds, we used to take the snowmobiles, we'd take the tracks off. We had a track dyno, and we'd put these tracks on just a tunnel, and we would spin those tracks 24/7 for weeks for each sled to loosen, because nowadays the technology, the racetrack is very pliable, very soft, but back then they weren't. But we made them that way. That was just one of the tricks we did.
Yeah, I've heard of that. People turning tracks with electric motors on a jig, just trying to get them to take shape. But yeah, tracks have come a long way. I'm guessing probably the last 40 years or so.
I think people are still doing it.
I
You
know
have to
they
be.
are. They
The stuff-
yeah. You have to
think we
turn it
think
over.
about this new 106, it got thicker. What else changed? Let's just break them in hard.
Same way with belts.
I see you guys got a picture up of a semi that actually is from the mid 70s when Richard bought that over in Michigan. And I don't think too many independent teams had semis at that time. Audrey and Richard had 4 boys that were racing, so we almost needed a semi to get all of the hardware to the races. It was just, I mean, we would go in there and we each had a snowmobile or 2. So you can imagine the amount of hardware that we were carrying around all the time to go racing. But I think, Chuck, and I don't know, I would say 1978, 1979, when Skidoo came out with the IFSs and we were the independent team, we each had 3 or 4 IFSs because we had a 250, a 340, and a 440. So every one of us had a 250, a 340, and a 440 plus our spares. So it was a huge fleet. And I don't even know how we kept track to that many snowmobiles and were able to. I mean, you got to keep in mind that we were ice oval, so all these sleds, just like now, they needed traction control, they needed studs, they needed carbides, they needed clutching and everything to ice oval race.
Did you guys have like a large pit crew? I guess when Team Decker was, when you were still independent, I mean, like you said, there's probably 12 sleds between the 4 brothers. How did you manage that? Or was it just the family, or did you have friends come along to the track with you?
Yeah, no, we had a good crew. We had full-time crew members. Each driver had at least 2 full-time. So, we worked on our own sleds as well. And then we'd have 2 mechanics. And a lot of those mechanics ended up working for us when we started our performance shop. And some of those guys are still involved in racing. Some are working for the factories, building exhaust systems or whatever. But yeah, no, you needed a lot of help. I mean, we had guys that drove the truck. That was our first semi. We had 2 semis, actually. The second one was bigger.
Yeah, and actually, Chuck, when it started, Richard bought a dealership in Marshfield, and that was really what kickstarted our so that we could race, because we had the dealership. So we had access to the snowmobiles and motorcycles that we raced. But I remember Richard, he would never let us work in the shop during working hours. He built a separate shop, and all of our race stuff was separate from the business. But the crew, unlike what you see now, it was a lot of friends and family. and they weren't paid. I mean, these guys were volunteers, but they were very dedicated and devoted, and they would come into the shop. They'd all show up at 5 o'clock at night, and we would just burn the midnight oil until 12, 1 o'clock in the morning, working on snowmobiles. And it was a pretty, at least every driver had 2 or 3 mechanics. So it was a pretty big crew on the road.
Well, the mechanics got quite the reward, working for a top tier group of guys. So I bet you they still could tell stories of the wild nights out afterwards and winning.
Probably 1 or 2.
Just one,
Just 1 or 2.
Mr. Boston days. So yeah, no, that's awesome. I mean, you guys been around long enough where, here's Alan on an IFS sled. And I think I got another one of you both on twin trackers. And there's been talks in the last handful of years about twin trackers making a reemergence in the ice oval racing days. I guess we'll start with Alan first on all the variations of sleds you guys have got to ride. Did you have a particular favorite that was, suited to your driving style a little bit better?
Yeah, these twin tracks were very unique. I mean, they were very different from a single track, basically because they were so left side way, you sat on the left-hand side of the snowmobile. It really worked completely different from a single track. And it took some getting used to a twin track because they wanted to turn right more than they wanted to turn left, especially on the entry of the corner. So a lot of guys, when they first came out with the twin tracks, we wouldn't even race twin tracks. I think we stayed on single tracks for 2 or 3 years after the twin track was out in racing. But once you got used to a twin track and it was like slow dancing out there. You just had to be really finicky, and you had to be, nothing happened fast. You had to really be calculated to get it in the corner. But once you were in the corner and you started to transfer the weight over, oh my God, they were so nice then. I mean, the sky was the limit. You could go as fast as you wanted to in the corner because you weren't going to flip off. They were very stable. So they were a special sled. And as you guys know, they had a clutch in the drivetrain, which unlocked the inside track to further the cornering ability. And those were a little tricky too, because they were adjusted so close that they ran on the steering bar through a steering cable that unlocked this motorcycle clutch. So the minute you did a slight turn, because on ice oval, you don't turn that much if your carbides are hooked up. If the carbides are sharp and they're doing their job. So it was really close, and one thing I can remember is everybody would come to the starting line and they'd come up to the starting line and they'd turn right. So all these twin tracks are but they're really facing the outside wall because they wanted to make sure the clutch was unlocked when they started, right? But yeah, it was a unique sled. It would be so interesting. There's a lot of technology. I think they still have a lot of competitiveness. I think they still have a lot of interest. And I think it would be really something to see some of the twin tracks out there again. I have heard that my old race team manager, Guitan Duval, is going to put on an exhibition race up in Montreal this year. So we may see some show up there for an exhibition race. And we'll see how it goes. We'll see how the interest goes for the twin tracks. They're very collectible. But they should, if the young drivers now could have an opportunity to get on the twin tracks, I think they would absolutely love them.
Yeah, that's what we've heard. They're just so unique and different. And that alone has, an appeal to it, in my opinion. They're a little bit before my time, so I wish I could have got to see them race. A lot of moving parts, and like we've talked about, it's definitely a builder's class. There's just so much mechanically going on, and you got a lot of fiberglass between the hood and the side panels, which I'm a fan of. If you can make nice, either carbon fiber or fiberglass work, it looks really good.
Yeah, Chuck, you want to jump in and see how your kind of rendition of the thought of the elegancy or the ride style of a twin tracker. You know, you did it as well.
Yeah, he's got his WC, the 87 WC on a twin
Yeah.
tracker.
Yeah, the only one. The only Decker.
Well, yeah, and actually, my brother's probably won more races than I did through the years, but I won the big one, so I always give him a hard time about that. But and that's a story in itself, how that race came about. But the twin track, like Alan said, they were very unique. They, you know, I'm so glad I got to live in that era to race a twin track, because it was the fastest race sled ever built, and to this day, still the fastest race sled. It still holds. I still hold the 25 lap record at Eagle River. They haven't even gotten close to it, and that's where a twin tracks would really shine. I mean, whatever we ran for lap times on lap one, if you had enough in your body, you could probably run that same lap time on lap 25. The only thing that kept you back was falling out of the seat, because they were very aggressive. They were very hard to ride, as far as they're very tiring to ride. I remember when in '97, when they switched back to the single track, a lot of guys quit because they just want to start over. Jacques Villeneuve, he thrived on it. He says, "I'm so glad he went back to the single track." He said, "It extended my race career by 10 years. He said, I would have had to quit in '97 just because physically I wasn't able to keep riding a twin track. But going back to the single track extended my career by 10 years. I remember him and I talking one time in Eagle River about that. So they were hard to ride in that respect, but probably the most satisfying race sled you could ever ride for an ice vehicle race sled. They were just that part of it. You know, it's just. I think back to those days, and I'd love just to get back on and build a ride one like I used to. Obviously, at 65, I don't think I go as fast as I used to. But I also, on this other hand, people would say, "What's it like riding a twin track?" I said, "Well, you know, I love my twin trackers, but every time I'd look at that sled, and I'd have to get on it and go down to the start-finish line, it's like this sled, all the sled wants to do is hurt me." Because like Alan said, they wanted to turn right instead of left. And the reason that happened so much, and it did happen a lot, you saw a lot of bad wrecks on twin tracks, is all the inside weight. But that's what, like Alan referred to, once you got into the corner, that's what allows the corner so fast, is we could get that weight transferred to the right. The sled was not going to high side on you ever. And whatever speed you could carry it wide open all the way around the corner. But getting in the corner was a tricky situation. If you decided to lean, or if you lost concentration for a split second and you leaned a little bit off the sled before you started the turn, that left side ski with so much weight between the sled and the rider would bite so hard that no matter how strong you were, you're going one direction, and that was straight ahead into the bales, and you could not fix it. So that part was a little tricky. Through the years, the drivers obviously were very used to that, and you didn't see that happen as much. But in the beginning, there was a lot of bad accidents on them in the beginning.
What is I mean, you, like I said, you guys have been around the sport and seen it grow and change over the number of years. And innovation and change has always been a part of the sport. What is your guys' take on like the F3 sleds nowadays? I mean, there was an F3 class back in your day, but that's a little different. I guess, you know, Alan, your son-in-law won a WC on an F3 sled, and the racing's been pretty competitive at Eagle River the last couple of years. Any thoughts on where it stands today?
Well, it's getting better. You know, anytime you pick out a certain design or a certain type of sled, and you make it the premier class, guys are going to get involved and they're going to try to make a better mousetrap. So you're going to throw a lot of money and technology and, you know, engineering into those type of sleds. Of course, you know, I was glad that I had the opportunity to run, you know, the full race sleds, you know, the single tracks, the 78s. We started in 78 and moved up to offsets, and then eventually transitioned into twin tracks. Those were sleds made specifically for ice oval racing. But we'll see how it goes. I mean, I think that the F3 is growing more popular, and it's getting more legs. You know, I think that anytime you can bring, you can get access to the snowmobile. So if a driver is up and coming and he can have access to an F3 and get the basic sled, and then, you know, pimp it out and work on it and get it to race ready, I think it'll bring more sleds and more, you know, and bring more numbers into it. But I guess we'll see how the F3 thing goes. Like, you know, like Chuck and I, we were fortunate, and we were able to drive sleds that were pretty much just made for oval racing. You know, the twin track, I mean, that thing that just didn't happen. When I was working for Bombardier in 81 and I went back and tested the first concept, I remember Gilles Villeneuve, he used to be coming to the factory all the time. And as you guys recall, he was the first one to experiment with a twin track. But there was people involved in that, like Gilles Villeneuve and the Unsers, who were trying to incorporate, you know, car racing technology into snowmobiling. And I, you know, as I look back, I think that's how a lot of these ideas started and snowballed from there.
Well, I don't know if we'll ever see the F1 or IndyCar of snowmobile racing come back, but we're all hoping it does. And the right person creates a series around it, and it brings us back to ESPN and possibly greater and bigger things in a constructors championship. Maybe that'll happen with time to be told.
Yeah, I guess
of these legendary sleds.
My only question, I guess, is Chuck, with, you know, running the Derby track for a lot of years and then transitioning from one class being the WC to the next. Was there a lot of kickback like there was? I mean, I think you see more of it now because social media can be used as a platform to complain on. But as far as the racing goes, I think the F3 has shown that the field has been pretty tight the last couple of years. Yeah,
you're right, Norm. But there's really good riders on the F3 sleds too. If you look at who's riding, it's the champ riders that are riding them for the most part, right?
Yep.
And I think there's a place for F3. Probably where I disagree with some people is the place probably isn't the pinnacle of racing. The pinnacle of racing should always be a purpose-built race sled, something that spectators can can't wrap their brain around. That's why it brings them out to the track. It's not a trail sled. I don't think the Indy 500 gets 500,000 people because they're driving Ford Focuses. You know, they're watching a vehicle that is so sophisticated, and whether, you know, like Formula One or Formula One boats, or you know, even in car racing, or you've been around that, you know, super late models are the pinnacle, right? I mean, I think that's what brings the crowd out too. It's not necessarily the pure stocker, even though the pure stockers can put on maybe the best race of the night. But probably the crowd comes to see the pinnacle, and that's something that is usually out of reach for most average person. And that's the lure of bringing the spectators into the sport. That's in my estimate. That's in my opinion.
Exotic is king. I think you hit it on the head. You know, it's what really brings people out. It's a sound. It's a creativity. and it's the expense of the product. How much does it cost? Oh, it's
And-
$100,000 out there. Oh.
Right. And it's the crazy people that get on the stuff to ride it. You know, it makes heroes out of people that raced twin tracks back then because they were so hard to ride. I mean, they were so fast. So all of that combined is what makes it special. And like I said, is there a place for F3? Absolutely. F3. I mean, especially the F3 from the past when it was a builder's class. That was a great class. But, you know, I talk to a lot of people and they just don't see that same thing happen with F3 today. Is it good racing? Sure, anything can be good racing, but it's not exotic.
Yeah, I get what you're saying. It's the same. You know, not everyone's gonna be able to race an F3, but anyone could go buy one essentially, and you know, put a kid on it and try to make it a race sled.
I have to say, I do like the Chuck's concept of, you know, an Indy car gives it that exotic feel, but that baseline for the teams of creativity. I think that the IndyCar style classes in the future, I think, are the future.
Yep.
Going back to the builders class.
It's
You
not
know,
a builder's class, but the chassis limited.
who knows? Maybe someday the Decker Triple Crown will be on resurrected twin tracks. A series of those guys get out there. That would bring some people to the racetrack, I think.
Yeah, you know, I bet you put up a series for some twin trackers with a little bit of coin behind it. I bet you there'd be some that crawl out of the woodwork.
And I'd love to see Dave the Spain back in Speed Channel.
Yeah.
Yeah.
You know, the good part is there's still enough. I was surfing around here the other day on YouTube, and they had Brad Hewling starting up one of his twin tracks. And I mean, you know, you can appreciate that. And here, you know, it's years back, but, you know, he still remembers the good old days. And, you know, these guys are very knowledgeable on them. Yeah, they're not going to be the drivers any longer, but, you know, a qualified, competent, a brave and a good student as a driver, these guys would mold them into running laps as fast as they ever did as well.
Good team owners is, I think, what you're saying there, Dave. Good team owners.
That's what I'm saying. I think it could happen someday. Who knows?
This is the most I've ever heard of twin trackers in the darks of rooms and conversations, and with the potential of the designer of the twin tracker getting put into the Hall of Fame. The event up at Eagle River, or I'm sorry, not Eagle River, at Valcourt with the showcase of this product. There's a lot of talk about it, and I think we'll see something in the future.
Yeah. I tell you what, you take a twin tracker from 1992 or 87 or 95, it don't matter, and you put on some new technology clutching, some nice rubber tracks, and new technology shocks, you might only want to run a 250 in it because they would be really fast.
I really like that you bring that up, and I hope the right people are listening, because we're gonna have to figure a way to make these detune enough to make them safe but fun.
Yeah. Yeah, and they can. You can detune it. It's not a problem. I mean, when we went to 440s, they detuned us. We didn't go 103. We only went about 107 or 8. So
Yeah, I think that's a good standard. Set it, build it where it kind of goes around that 100 marker, and
Yeah.
let's go have some fun with it.
exactly.
Yeah. Well, I mean, we just got a heck of a history lesson. I want to touch on one other thing with the Triple Crown. We've talked about the family and a little bit in the background. Your mom, Audrey, she was just as big a part of racing for you guys as your father and brothers were. Touch on her a little bit and how her racing career evolved as well.
Alan?
Well, yeah, I mean, so Audrey, she was the silent motivator, or she was the one that really ruled. Audrey did some racing. Audrey was very competitive. Audrey, I remember one time I was at a race and I was standing next to Audrey, and I think Mike and Steve were out there racing, and someone came up to Audrey and said, "Audrey, aren't you nervous about your young boys out there racing?" And Audrey said, "The only thing I'm nervous about is that they might lose." But oh God, I don't know, Chuck. I'll let you pick up. I mean, Audrey was, she worked behind the scenes very quietly, but really was, she was really the strong, kept the fabric together of the whole Decker racing operation.
Yeah, 100%. I mean, Richard stayed at home. He ran the business. He sat in the office, and I remember before we could drive cars, she took us to the races. I mean, she went to every race that we raced at almost. I mean, you know, there's times that, you know, we're probably up in wherever, but couldn't make it. But I mean, she was into the sport very heavily. Like Alan says, a lot of behind the scenes. But one thing a lot of people don't know about is when vintage racing started, two guys at Larry Smith and Fred Smith, they're both from Minneapolis. They're not related. Larry Smith actually worked for us and was a mechanic for Mike when Mike on his race team came to my office, and they didn't talk to me. They didn't talk to Richard. They went to Audrey and said, "Audrey, we got this idea. We want to do some vintage races. We want to do an exhibition here at the Derby track, because we think, you know, there's a time now that these old sleds should be showcased again in racing." And it was, the two guys were, like I said, Fred Smith and Larry Smith. And she says, "Let's do it." And she come to me and she says, "Chuck, you're gonna let these guys run here." So we did that for 2 or 3 years, and it got more and more sleds. But then that spun off PVR. Then they formed Pro Vintage Racing to make rules, make the classes, because it was a lot of people wanted to do it. And I think at the very peak, the biggest year we had around 1,300 entries one year at Eagle River.
Wow.
And
That's some numbers.
So a lot of you talk to Fred Smith or Larry Smith, they'll say it's because of Audrey Decker that PBR came around, because she's the one that okayed us to come to Eagle River and start this thing.
That's amazing. To piggyback on that, Steve Perrick just posted, president of PVR. He said Larry still has the handwritten rules that she wrote for PVR, handwritten letters. So that is awesome to hear. I mean, you guys and your family have been a very large, have had a very large impact on the sport of ice oval for many years, and we're absolutely thrilled to see it continue with the form of the Triple Crown, and it sounds like it has a very good future.
I'm gonna throw one quick thing out here before we close about Audrey, and I was kind of waiting to do this privately, but I think this is as good a place as any to say it. But I'm not sure what Dick had been telling Audrey about our ideas or what my thought was on all of this. But the last time I saw her live, we were up at the Eagle River. It was championship weekend, and I was leaving the hot box, and she came over and we talked for a few minutes. And I'll never forget this. I swear this is true, that, you know, I went to shake her hand goodbye, and she looked me in the eye and just kind of wouldn't let my hand go, you know, and it wasn't uncomfortable, but I just, that really stuck with me. And when I left that hot box, I thought, God, I wonder what she meant by that. I mean, she didn't say anything, but the look in her eye was like, there's something special that you're going to maybe do. And I just, you know, wish you all the luck in the world. And without saying it, that was the feeling I got. And I just still remember the very last time I saw her, and then she passed away that year, and that was goodbye for me.
Passing the torch.
Yeah,
Fire burning.
They stuck together. I mean, Audrey and Richard, you know, they not only started the dealership and the Decker Racing team, they stayed together and started Dairyland Greyhound Park. They bought the World's Championship racetrack in what was it, 85, Chuck? And they worked together as a team. And
Decker Snow Venture Tours.
Decker Snow Venture Tours. I mean, the list goes on and on and on. And I'm sure that Audrey had a big, not outright, but quietly, she had a pretty big say in it because we knew that's how she operated.
Absolutely. That is awesome to hear. I'm sure there is a lot more stories that we could tell at some point, and we'd love to have you guys back on the show or talk to you at the track to learn some more. We are about at our time limit for today. So thank you, gentlemen, for coming on board and telling us a lot about the history and the Triple Crown race, which I think is going to be a huge step in the right direction for the F500 class and as a series to come to the future.
Yeah. Well, I want to thank you, Brandon. Thank you, Norm. And thank you, Dave, for bringing this exciting new series that is certainly going to make some waves this year, and it's going to get some attention.
Yeah,
absolutely.
I just want to
thank you guys, all of you.
I just want to close also by thanking everybody. I think Audrey and Richard are looking down right now, and I think they're probably getting as excited as we all are about this. And it's going to be an honor to work with everybody involved in this race and these racers, and I'm really excited about it. So thanks again, everybody.
Yeah, thank you guys, and we're looking forward to it, and we'll see you at the track soon. So thanks everyone for tuning in, and be sure to watch CPTC this weekend up at Beaujeu, starting off the season Saturday and Sunday.
Definitely.
Let's have a good, safe season and a full one. No rainouts this year.
Now,
Yeah, cold.
Mr. Bennett, the Bennett family, and that all comes out good. That's sad to hear. So prayers out to them.
Yeah, prayers are out.
All right. Thanks, everybody, for tuning in. We'll see you next week after CPCT.
Good night, guys. God bless you all.
Good night.